A month after its initial launch, Sonic X Shadow Generations dropped some interesting DLC. It gave us a brand new level, Tokyo, which I probably don't need to explain to anybody is a real world location, which was interesting, as well as a much fluffier form for Shadow, and a far more famous voice coming out of his throat. That's right, we got ourselves a movie Shadow DLC. And originally, I was just gonna make a quick minute-long short telling you how I felt about it. So real quickly, if you'd like to know, overall, it's solid. I think the level design is gorgeous and a lot of fun. I often say there's no company that loves its home country more than Sega, because Tokyo looks simply gorgeous, even showing off a crazy skyline, even though it lasts only a few seconds. This is the same core gameplay as Shadow Generations, and I already love that, so of course I was going to enjoy this as well. While it's a shame it's not 2 acts, I do love the 2 extra challenge stages, and this feels like just enough extra content I needed to really make the core game feel like a full package. Overall, it's great, but I do have a couple of nitpicks. Thought the wall transfer ramps were a little bit squirrely. That could just be me readjusting to the controls after being away from the game for a few weeks, but it was still kind of noticeable in very specific spots for me. Shadow himself looks like he jumped off of a PS3, and Keanu Reeves, the big draw for this new little add-on, sounds terrible.
Suspicious. I should follow.
Like really, really bad. Like, dude, you just got done voicing this character in a movie. It's the same job. Also, what's going on with some of the dialogue here? It's a little confusing. We see Shadow jump into a portal, and then he comes out looking like movie Shadow, so clearly this is the Shadow we have been playing in Shadow Generations. But as he's running around, he says stuff like, "This is how Maria described Earth." Like, Shadow, our game Shadow, has lived on Earth for years at this point. That shouldn't be a surprise. I don't care if it's not called Tokyo specifically. There's no way there isn't some sort of Sonic World equivalent to it. Even then, he would get that description from his version of Maria. So like, is this movie Shadow, or is this just some weird continuity hiccup with game Shadow? And for that matter, if this is our Shadow hopping into a different dimension, is he possessing the body of movie Shadow? Did game Shadow canonically run around in Sonic 3 for a minute there? I don't know. Oh yeah, I almost forgot you can collect these screenshots. That's kind of nice. Gives you something to do, and yeah, I expect a lot of these to show up as YouTube thumbnails. Even though there were some problems with, at the very least, the voice of Shadow, I gotta admit, I love that, warts and all. And that thought, loving this despite its flaws, is why I can't just leave this video at only a couple measly minutes, because it dawned on me, as I'm sure it dawned on many of you watching this, that all of those nitpicks were once just commonplace in the long forgotten movie tie-in game. Continuity errors, bad voice acting, questionable art direction. Yeah, baby, it's all here. Also, hell yeah for giving us Mean Bean Robotnik. That's the absolute closest the games have ever come to giving a shout out to the old school Sonic cartoons. Thank you, Sega. Please be more courageous. Those little cameos are all I'm asking for. Considering the other early 2000 tropes and callbacks that are brought back from the dead simply from making a game centered around Shadow the Hedgehog, I can't think of a more perfect DLC add-on to really be the cherry on top when it comes to early 2000s game nostalgia than in the form of a level that looks like a movie tie-in from that era. And even with all of that considered, I do feel like this game, specifically this DLC, might prove to be an important point in the grand tapestry of the Sonic franchise, and maybe even for gaming overall. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. Oh, that's a lot of hammers. Or a lot of Tacticus is? Tacticae? You likely need no introduction to this legendary franchise from Games Workshop, and considering this game has been around since 2022 and has done a wonderful job cultivating and catering to its expansive community, you might already be a fan of Tacticus. But just in case you haven't heard yet, this is a fast-paced, turn-based tactical RPG set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and with it comes more than 70 legendary champions and 17 factions, and they're always adding more, including this December, the the famous Red Gobbo just in time for Grotmas, along with PvE campaigns, PvP, guild raids, live events, on top of an average rating of 4.5 out of 5 on the App Store. This is clearly the go-to game to scratch that tactical itch anywhere you want. My viewers can not only download the game right now, thanks to the link in the description, or the QR code on the screen, but you can also punch in the code HAPPYDEC, that's N-E, Happy D-E-C, it's short for December. Don't use another vowel. Use the code HAPPYDEC, and that will land you 2,000 gold and 50 Blackstone. And that goes for new and current players. They really treat this fan base good. Wow. Thank you again to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to it. Once upon a time, you could not get away with making a blockbuster movie without releasing a tie-in video game to coincide with the film's release. Hell, at one point, it would have been strange to see only one game made for one movie. Interesting to consider when you also consider that the first major movie tie-in game was largely blamed for the video game crash of the 1980s. Obviously, it wasn't that simple, but we all love to have a scapegoat. Still, you'd think that when games came back into prominence thanks to Nintendo, publishers and studios would take a look at E.T. and think better of rushing out a game just to release alongside a movie. But no, that's exactly what they did over and over and over. And, well, it worked. Despite the infamous reputation these tie-in games would garner, they would still be selling like gangbusters. And it's likely that most of these titles were the gateway into gaming for a lot of young kids. I mean, I played Ninja Turtles before I ever checked out Mario because that was already a franchise my baby brain was familiar with. So it was easy for me to go from Ninja Turtles to
Koopas.
No matter how bad these games could be, kids didn't care, and that's who these games were largely made for, especially back in the early days. And you could make a game for any kind of property. So even if you couldn't take your kid to Alien 3, you could at least buy them Alien 3 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the Amiga, or Commodore 64, or Game Boy, Game Gear, Master System, Genesis, Super NES. Yet despite the infamy that was Atari's ET, while it is blamed for nearly destroying gaming as a whole, it was simply a sign of things to come. It laid the groundwork for some very prominent players later on. Bad movie games were a dime a dozen for each following gaming generation, but every now and then you'd get some stellar experiences. Aladdin got a great game made by Capcom on the SNES, and over on the Genesis, it became one of the best-selling games for that system and raised the bar for how pretty sprites can be. Seriously, as far as visuals are concerned, this is what Nintendo was trying to beat. That's the challenge they gave Rare when they were tasked with making Donkey Kong Country. I'm not kidding. And jumping into the next generation, one of the most important games in the history of video games is undoubtedly GoldenEye 64. This one bucked the trend of rushing a game out to be timed with the release of a movie, as GoldenEye 64 came out much later, and it was well worth the wait. Rare's iconic tie-in game helped popularize and revolutionize the first-person shooter on home consoles, and I don't think I need to explain to anybody watching a gaming YouTube video why that was a big deal. The next generation saw Spider-Man 2 also breaking records and inspiring future games to this very day, taking the newly popular open world genre, which was a big deal back in the day for having all of this space for all of your activities, and making it real damn fun to traverse between all of those activities. This firmly cemented the wall crawler as not only a comic, cartoon, and movie icon, but a gaming icon as well. And this set of Spider-Man games also normalized the idea of bringing in the actual film talent to play their same roles in gaming form, and normalize the idea of doing that terribly.
Oh, you think you're smart, buddy? Well, think again. I hit a bunch of cameras around here, and now I have an even better shot than I was planning. You punching me in the jaw and taking my camera. So thanks.
And it's in this same generation of consoles, and a little bit of the start of the next, where movie games really hit their peak. But when you think about it, leading up to this point, nothing had actually changed all that much. They just took advantage of some features they didn't have before. They were still getting multiple versions of games based off one movie, at least a bare minimum of two for most of them, one console and one handheld. And while a lot of these games are still considered bad, let's be real, it's not like all of us had stellar top-of-the-notch taste when we were kids. We all have great memories with some bad games. games. But I guess my point is, despite the reputation of being lazy cash-ins, every now and then these movies and these properties would serve as the basis for some really inspiring interactive experiences. And they absolutely deserve to be remembered among some of the gaming greats. Spider-Man 2, GoldenEye, King Kong, Die Hard Trilogy, X-Men Origins Wolverine. See, you don't even need to have a good movie to make a good game. But while we hover around in the same generation that game was released, that being the 360 and PS3 era, this is where we really started to see things shift for the tie-in game. We still got them here and there, don't get me wrong, but it was becoming harder and harder to justify spending money on the ballooning prices of development in the HD era when all you're really trying to do is sell some kids on a 2-hour flick. Can you believe there was a time where Robert Downey Jr. was affordable enough to do a crappy version of Tony Stark in a crappy Iron Man game? Because that actually happened. It feels kind of surreal nowadays, but that was just super normal back in 2008. No, I said Tony Stark specifically, not Iron Man. They actually got somebody else to voice him when he was in the suit. I'm not kidding.
He's right. You don't want to argue with Jarvis, do you?
That's right, I'm retired. Just give me my gold watch and take away my parking pass, okay?
And while I joke, really, when you consider with hindsight what the Marvel movies would become, you can start to see where the bubble was gonna burst for these tie-in experiences. This would be the death to many of the movie tie-in game genre. And yes, I did say genre because I have seen people call tie-ins a genre, which it's not. But in the 360 era, it might as well have been, because they transitioned into something else, something incredibly popular, but something that doesn't really get brought up a whole lot when the conversation of movie tie-ins is discussed. And I am speaking of the Lego video games. This was the next prominent evolution of the movie game. Lego has always been a popular brand, and they've always had some well-regarded video games, but none of them would hit quite as hard as they did when Traveler's Tales took over and made Lego Star Wars. That first one dropped near the end of the PS2's life, but it left quite the impact. Hell, I even played it, and I'm not a huge fan of Lego or Star Wars. But as tired as the concept of the Lego game is nowadays, it was absolutely novel when this first game dropped. It was such a weird idea. Take a Lego set and then make a video game out of it, and doing such a good job with it too. Traveler's Tales had hit a gold mine, which hell yeah, good to see some Sonic alumni doing well. See, this still counts as a Sonic video. I didn't just use that DLC as an excuse to talk about a broader gaming subject. Now, once again, even the Lego branded games are nowhere near as prominent as they used to be, but they were absolutely everywhere in this particular generation. And most of these games were tied to, you guessed it, a movie franchise. Of course, this bubble would too pop. And while Lego games still happen, well, they just don't make as many games as they used to. And as for movie tie-in games themselves, well, the concept as we knew it up to that point was all but dead. Again, they still exist here and there. They're never gone completely, but studios just didn't see the point in financing such an expensive advertisement. But they still wanted to take advantage of games. So they moved on to the newest, most prominent, and most importantly, cheapest form of gaming. That, of course, is mobile games, which brings everything full circle. Movie games started off as nothing more than a handheld toy. Literally, the first tie-in electronic game was this little block thing made to promote the first Star Trek movie, because that's all video games were to these companies. They were simply toys, simply little products to help promote a bigger project. And while we might love a lot of those movie games, that's how a lot of studios have always seen video games, just a dumb and lesser thing. And honestly, when you look through some of these mobile games, there are some good ones out there, don't get me wrong, but there is still a lot of shovelware crap on here that really isn't worth your time. The movie tie-in game might have changed, but the basic concept of it, the purpose and reputation really hasn't changed at all. And you can't really blame a lot of these studios. Why would you go to all the trouble of making a multi-million-dollar game that's only there to promote a movie when there's a lot more money to be made on the App Store, and all of that done at a fraction of the cost that it'd take to make a proper video game? But this history lesson is fairly obvious, and it has been for some time now. This isn't even the first time I spoke about the extinction of the movie game. I did that over 7 years ago on my Jurassic Park video, and I probably mentioned it again when I covered all the different versions of Spider-Man 3. I don't actually remember if I did or not, so you better go watch it just to be sure, and let me know in the comments. But all of that leads us back to Shadow. This DLC is so interesting to me, not just because of the content itself, but how it was presented to us and what it represents for the current landscape of movie games and, well, game movies. If the Sonic movies had been made in the early 2000s, you know, like how they pretend they are, and they made an entire game based around the movie series itself, featuring the voice talent, prizing some of the roles, featuring levels and character designs from said films, nobody would have bat an eye. The only thing that would have made it interesting would be in the same way that Street Fighter, the movie, the game was interesting. A game based off a movie, based off a game, featuring a bunch of cast members completely phoning it in. Would have been here and gone and would have just been an interesting footnote in a bunch of YouTube videos just like this one. But here in 2024, releasing all this now is a huge selling point. And we are even getting the full cast or a full game. Just a single level, couple quick challenges, and some badly acted dialogue from Keanu. What was once so commonplace is now once again intriguing and exciting. Hell, this isn't even Keanu's first movie tie-in game, and this is extra neat when you consider that the Sonic series isn't even the first to do this type of smaller movie promotion in a video game that's doing its own thing in its own canon. First example I can think of is the Arkham series, which is one of the first examples of a larger brand bucking the trend of making the necessary movie tie-in. They had planned to make a Dark Knight game, but that was scrapped in favor of continuing to push Arkham as its own thing, and thank God they did that. So instead of getting a full game, we instead got skins, which was fine. And the same thing is being done nowadays with Spider-Man. But still, a lot of what makes that game great came from an earlier movie game, and I'm sure a lot of you played through the most recent game looking like Toby. Hell, skins are a major way movies are promoted just everywhere in games. It takes so little effort with so much more revenue in return. It's likely a parent wouldn't throw down money for a John Wick game for their kid, but it's likely they'd get that kid some V-Bucks, which that kid can then spend on a John Wick skin. I know I said earlier that parents would buy whatever if it was on store shelves, but that was before the ESRB stepped in and let us know there were blood and guts and boobs and stuff in games. So no, not every single way they tie movies into games has died out, but it's still fascinating to see all of those commonplace elements now be sold to us as a premium experience in the form of an extra level and skin. On top of the fact that this is Shadow the Hedgehog of all characters, the mascot for the early 2000s, the same era where movie games were at their most prominent. This is hitting nostalgia on a meta level, and that's genuinely kind of brilliant. Not only does this game redeem a lot of poorly received Sonic games, this also redeems the very idea of the movie tie-in video game. I mean, hell, how many of you are now excited at the prospect of a Sonic game based on the movie universe? I genuinely think that's more of a possibility than ever before, considering the reception of this DLC. And that'll only be heightened if Sonic 3 does well in the box office, and it's likely it's going to do very well in the box office, which is wild for a lot of other reasons I want to talk about after that movie comes out. And putting that aside, with this next Sonic racing game already being teased with some multiverse shenanigans, I don't think it's too far-fetched to imagine that we get a little more of the movie universe represented there. And of course, where Sonic games make the most money, that being the mobile games, you better believe that Hardlight is already fully promoting Sonic 3. So yeah, we are seeing more of the movie Sonicverse coming home to the world of video games, which is very interesting to see. This would have been such an obvious move if this all happened even 10 years ago. And yeah, I don't know if it's possible, but I don't think it's unreasonable to think that this could be a sign of the return of the movie tie-in. Just probably not as we remember them. But I do think we do have some modern day examples of how that might be handled, and I would hope that Sonic follows those same concepts. Speaking specifically of the new Indiana Jones game or that upcoming James Bond game, which is wonderful when you consider how that spy is forever going to be tied to the history of gaming thanks to GoldenEye. And hell, I'm not a big James Bond guy, but I am interested to see what the guys who made Hitman can do. And my beloved Jurassic Park seems to be doing the same with the ongoing Evolution series and this upcoming survival game. And they're even embracing their own gaming history with a game collection, which just came out with this pristine box with all these cool extras. That's 7 games in here based off one movie. And that's not even the entire list of games based around Jurassic Park. It's absolutely crazy. Now, it's important to note that everything I just listed isn't dependent on a current movie release, because these are all long-standing film franchises that just make money off the branding alone. So no matter when that James Bond game releases, releases, no matter when that Jurassic Park game comes out, it's always going to make money. It doesn't need to be tied into whatever is on the screen at the time. And I kind of love that. I personally hope to see more licensed games follow this formula. It's worked well for Batman, it's worked well for Spider-Man, and if games are going to just be getting more and more expensive, then take your time and make something special. It shows respect for the brand, it shows respect for the medium of video games, and it shows respect to the fan base. And with a larger development time, shows respect to the most important people of the bunch, the developers. And Shadow specifically is an interesting case because while movie tie-ins aren't the same as they used to be, movies themselves simply aren't the same either. Bad movies based off games were as common of a trope as bad games based off movies, and all that was in the same era where Sonic games were considered bad, and Shadow was considered a cringy edgelord by a lot of the mainstream critics covering this stuff. But this one DLC brings all of these shameful elements back and celebrates them. The very existence of this is just mind-boggling to me. If you grew up with gaming throughout the 90s and the 2000s and have known for most of that time that movie games and game movies are awful, but they've all converged in this one level, this one little $6 DLC add-on to a Sonic game re-release. And it's great! And while Sonic 3 itself is going to be a big deal and all this Shadow promotion was kicked off in service to the film's release, it's also crazy to see the Sonic brand so confident at the box office. Movie studios used to see video games as a means to promote movies, and now they rely on video games to make movies. The 3 Sonic movies aside, Mario has made all the money at the box office. I think it's like the best an animated film has ever done, which is ridiculous. And movies aside, premium streaming services have been eating Hollywood's lunch for a while, and of course they're taking advantage of the long-form storytelling that game narratives generally need to really be told properly, and would you look at that, they work together quite nicely. Except for, that one show that is canon to this movie universe I'm dedicating all this time to. You really deserve better, Knuckles. I'm sorry your birthday sucked. Movies just aren't the end-all be-all in terms of entertainment like they used to be. Outside of streaming and premium television, games have long since surpassed them just in terms of revenue. Granted, a lot of that's thanks to mobile, and on top of all that, I think a lot of these film and game budgets have ballooned into psychotic and unattainable places, but that's a topic for another time. My point is, the Shadow DLC could be a sign of things to come. Maybe it's something as simple as greenlighting a proper movie tie-in video game for the Sonic series. I mean, might as well. That's the one nice thing about making a game based off a movie based off a game. The formula for making that a winning experience is already there. Just slap a new coat of paint on something that already works. Just look at Dragon Ball Evolution. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that Sega might consider that possibility, which itself is crazy for an old school Sonic fan who saw Sega try so very, very hard to cut itself off from anything American Sonic related. So no, this might not be the return of Sally Acorn, but it is still cool seeing this company kind of get it together in terms of the Sonic franchise and work in tandem with different regions to make something really special and really high quality. And this could show other studios that there is something to be said about making a proper gaming experience, maybe not just to promote a movie, but instead to expand an IP. If you have a good idea, you explore it in different ways, not just made as an advertisement for something else you're working on. Because yes, I kind of forgot in all of this Shadow DLC is simply here as a promotion for Sonic 3. Heck, the re-release of Sonic Generations is here largely because of an upcoming Sonic movie, but I think they're doing this in all of the right ways, which is great to see because I do feel they dropped the ball quite a bit when it came to Sonic 2, which is heartbreaking for me because that was largely based around my favorite era of Sonic. But ain't always about me. I'm happy to see them continuing to grow and continuing to learn. This is the last bit of promotion we will see for this movie before it properly hits theaters, at least in America. I know they already had the premiere over in the UK. But looking back, this really has been not only the year of Shadow, but fearless. All of the love for the franchise in the trailers. Shadow's got a gun, the greatest action figure and toys that the Sonic brand has ever gotten. For real, the movie line is just beautiful. Brand new Shadow story latched onto Sonic Generations, and it's better gameplay-wise and story-wise than Sonic Generations, and it features Black Doom. fully embracing the alien origins of the character while racing through a bunch of levels that are from what are considered the very worst Sonic games ever created. All of that while boldly calling back to what many consider an embarrassing era of licensed games with this DLC. I don't know how intentional that part was, because like I said, and I'm sorry I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the DLC itself, it's clear they really went all out with the little bit of content in this DLC. The only gripe I do have is this Shadow skin should be available in the rest of the game. I have seen the Twitter threads. I understand why it's not so simple as a skin swap, but this is still a paid product, and they still promoted the idea of swapping skins with Terios and the low poly Sonics. I don't think it's unreasonable for parents or common gamers to expect something as simple as seeing the movie version of Shadow in the rest of the game. I don't really care if it's not the same voice, and no, I'm sorry, I don't really care that it would have taken a lot more effort on Sega's part. It's kind of a problem they made for themselves, and I think it's a fair and obvious complaint. But yeah, honestly, with this last bit of promotion for a movie, I have not been so excited for Sonic content in a while, which is wild when you consider that Sonic Adventure 2 just really didn't hit with me like it did for folks that are younger than me. But they took all of these once shameful elements and made something truly spectacular this past year. All of it leading up to a movie that feels like they're incredibly confident in. And when you consider how I felt about the Knuckles TV show, that's wild to think I'm so positive on all of this stuff. But the Year of Shadow was incredible, and they ended it on a very high note. It's been an incredible journey leading up to the movie, and the next time I pop up with a video, I'll be giving you my thoughts on the film. So let's wrap things up here, and I'll see you all at the end of the journey that was the Year of Shadow. And one last time before we go, guys, if you haven't yet, be sure you use the QR code on the screen to download and check out Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. Use the code HAPPYDEC to get yourself that 2K gold and 50 Blackstone. Thanks again to Tacticus for sponsoring and supporting the video. Before I go, I do, of course, have to thank all the support I get over from the folks at Patreon, and a shout out to the folks who got a sneak preview of this script. If you didn't know, I accidentally started a stream when I initially started recording the script for this video. So some folks just got a wild sneak preview, and yeah, there you go. Hope you guys enjoyed that. We somehow turned that into a Q&A session, and don't worry, nothing crazy happened. It wasn't a Dark Side Phil moment, I promise. Don't look that up if you don't know what I'm talking about. Do not look that up. It's disgusting. Anyway, I should probably do the Patreon readout now, right? Yeah, let's get to that. Kyle Winter, Cyrus the Skeptic, Joseph Duncan, Sonic 2 Blue, Josh Strider, Trey Nobles, Hatsworth, Tiny Jericho, Ginger Bob, Jack of all spades, Tristan Trapp, Meekers, Bo Bennings, quote, Resident Fanboy, Miles the Prower, Singer J199, Sam Webster, Fish Flop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Jonathan Dobbs, Chad, Mr. SP, Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Stefan Plakanica, 3 Monic, Graham J. Hall, Lenny X, Wayne is Boss, Lederick, David 19 covers, completely threw me off by changing that from 20, David. Holy cow, can't believe how badly that screwed me up. I almost said 20. Anyway, Trash Baphomet, Enerjack 5, Grayson Conager, Xerxes the Renegade Jin, Ken K, Ven 101, Paxton Bisbee, Sindarin 7, Benui, Twilord. Did you know this entire video was AI generated? Crimson Rose, Roxas the Cat, Godzilla, Makuda of Salt, Gleam the Anomaly, Alexander Watson, Neil Gampa, Conan Kudo, Alexa most powerful ship in the 2 universes, Kaido Prower, Spearmint. You have to hurry. Bad Nick's going to be cutting off my only way to warn people soon. You have to stop him. Yeah, look, if people are still sticking around for the Patreon readouts, I just figured that was like kind of an outdated way to thank folks in YouTube videos. I feel like everybody else has stopped doing them except for me. But man, there's a lot of you guys who just like to, well, I'm not complaining. Thank you for letting me read this. Anyway, Omega Man 21, Penn Adelaide, Daza S, Drabo 06, the world's most unironic 8.5 tail stand, MT Mecha, Gob, the RSI, Sergeant, Seven Sol, Sweet Sonic, Sanjik Swing, Salem Hollow, Siegfried Wilder, Naburn Yurd, KB, Cho Henshin, and Sonic Bot. Guys, thank you so much for letting me have this as a job. It's pretty damn rad. Thank you for keeping the lights on for me. Finally feeling like I'm getting back on my feet after a crazy wild year, and I'm very excited for what's coming up on this channel. But yeah, I'll be back very soon with some speed readings, with some character analysis, and with the review of Sonic 3. So stick around for all that fun stuff. But until then, toot toot, Shadow Warriors.